Before we get to the questions, Big Turkey from Northwest Iowa is going to be introduced as a student of the soil. So I'll turn it over to him and we'll look forward to his presentation. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Ted, and the group that coordinated, organized this event, the opportunity to share some information with you. I became a student of soil in 1989. That's when we transitioned to alternative farming methods on the family farm where I was born and raised. My folks bought the farm from Bill and Margaret McDonald in 1960, so yes, I live on old McDonald's farm. After transitioning into the alternative crop production space and having success, I decided to start sharing that information with others. So in 1992, I started doing work as a crop and livestock nutrition advisor. I started studying GMOs in 1994 because they were the coming thing. And the more I studied them, the more reason I had for concern to look at it objectively and critically rather than euphorically. I started doing on-farm research in 1997. As a result of what we saw once it entered the feed supply, I coordinated a scientific study in 2008. It didn't get published until 2013. When you see the results of it, you may understand why it didn't get published sooner. Part of it was the lead scientist health issues as well. But as a student of soil, I have no problem admitting the more I know I don't know. And I have seen that serve me well both in soil and so many other subjects and topics. And it keeps you humble and at the same time gives you an amazing opportunity every single day to learn and learn and learn. And I often feel with the interaction that I have at events like this that I learn more from the people I'm talking with than what I may share or instill with them. And I'm going to start off on the subject that probably gives us the reason for why we have so much glyphosate use. GMO, genetically modified organism, or genetically engineered crops came on the market in 1996. The first version was BT. Bacillus thuringiensis is a natural occurring soil bacterium. They figured out a way to develop it and genetically modify it, insert it into plants, so you had in-plant insect protection. They also developed a version of this for corn rootworm. Then the glyphosate resistant species, we have the glyphosate resistant corn, soy, cotton, canola, sugar beets, alfalfa, creeping bentgrass. There's also Roundup Ready wheat that's been developed, but thankfully it's never been put on the market. We have Liberty Link crops. Of course, Liberty is the active ingredient is glyphosate, where the active ingredient in Roundup is glyphosate. Corn, soy, cotton. There's drought tolerant wheat that's been introduced that's genetically engineered in Argentina. More in the food crops, the golden rice, the papaya, the squash, the apples, the potatoes. The flavor saver tomato, was the first ever genetically engineered crop to enter the food supply. Didn't stay on the market because it didn't have taste. It lasted nearly forever on the shelf, but nobody wanted to eat it. Additional examples, RBGH is an example of genetic engineering. This has never entered the dairy market in your country, but it has been used extensively in our country. It is a genetically engineered growth hormone. It's injected into lactating dairy cows, causing them to produce more milk. With the side effects, it causes them to be susceptible to mastitis and other infections and causes difficulties with conception and reproduction. There's also genetically engineered salmon. There's now a plethora of lab-grown meat that is going to be coming into the marketplace that is all genetically engineered. There is genetically engineered milk now. They're developing a version of what they call milk using genetic engineering. Last, in 2020, we had in our country, and I'm sure in yours, a new term came to knowledge called gain of function. And that gain of function came into the conversation when, at the start of what I call a manufactured epidemic that most people know as COVID. And so I thought, well, what's the difference between the two? Genetic engineering is the modification and the manipulation of an organism's genes using technology. Gain of function is medical research that genetically alters an organism in a way that enhances the biological functions of the gene products. Is there really much difference? So injectable GMOs, in essence, an mRNA experimental gene therapy injectome is a genetically modified organism. Dr. Andy Wakefield says mRNA is a very dangerous version of genetic engineering. The goals of genetic engineering, they were great. We're going to improve nutrient content, we're going to increase yields to feed the growing population, we're going to get rid of drought tolerance, we're going to instill breeding drought tolerance or genetically engineered drought tolerance, implant insecticide, reduce insecticide use, herbicide tolerance will reduce herbicide use, and improve weed control. As far as increased yield, 1997, 1998, I did test plots. I started selling seed for a seed company in 1984. We had a full service crop production business, seed, fertilizer, chemical, custom application. I did a test plot for corn every year. When the BT corn came out in 1997-98, the seed company provided me with the seed to put the old reliable next to the BT version. And I always state that I never signed a technology agreement to plant that seed because the seed company gave it to me for that plot. And I have not or would not ever sign a technology agreement for one quite simple reason, I read it. This is the results of the first year's plot, and I won't bore you with all the details. If you look closely, the seed cost is higher and the net per acre is lower. It costs us $57.99 per acre off the net to have that BT corn. So we repeated it the next year, but it must have been a fluke. We had basically the same results. It cost us $58.95 an acre. That hybrid was an old reliable. The agronomists, the plant breeders, the geneticists, they did a good job of developing that hybrid. It had a lot of natural tolerance to corn borer and pests, and it was an all-around good sound hybrid. Well, the seed company saw these similar results across the board in the plots that they had put out. But you take a hybrid that was known to be susceptible to corn borer, or in one of my customers' definitions, he says, it looks to me like the plant breeders got lazy on the finishing the development of that hybrid, and they found out they could insert this here stuff into it and charge more for it, so they kind of did a shortcut. Which one do you think the industry promoted more as they went forward? Increased yield at the University of Nebraska in the early years. There was an 8 to 10% yield drag on the Roundup Ready soybeans in the days when they had the ability to do the side-by-side testing. In 2009, that ability was taken away from them in our country because the companies that owned the technology agreement or on that specific seed took away the researchers' rights to access the seed. Well, then there was an outcry and then they returned that right, but there was a caveat. Okay, yeah, we'll let you do the research, but before you can publish it, you have to clear it with us. So if anything might come out that was adverse against it, I'll let you guess what happened as far as the publication of those results. In 2009, there was also a report by the Union of Concerned Scientists, and they said there is no intrinsic increase in yield from GMOs. In 2014, USDA said GMO crops do not yield more, but they may provide a convenience. There's nothing in the genetic engineering process that gives more yield. In fact, it's just the opposite. There's no free lunch. when whatever the genetic engineering trait is enacted, it requires energy and a reduction of the nutrient uptake that would go towards yield. So it's actually lower if there's a side-by-side comparison when they do a true comparison. Herbicide use rates in the beginning was 32 ounces per acre for Roundup or glyphosate-based herbicides. By 2010, I know of producers in the Midwest that used as much as 96 ounces per acre, and we're putting on 2 to 3 applications per growing season and still not killing many of the weeds. In Argentina, they started at 2 liters per hectare in 1996. By 2009 and 2010, they were up to 10 to 20 liters per hectare. The Benbrook studies looked at the increased use of glyphosate from 74 through 2014 in our country. And as you can see, it went from 0.8 million pounds to 250 million pounds. This is a map of how many pounds per acre or per section, square mile is applied, and it's up to 500 in the great state of Iowa in the center where you can see I live. The insecticide use, BT is on 90% of the corn and cotton acres in our country. Nobody considers the fact that BT seed is registered as an insecticide. So the BT that's in the seed that's planted, if you base it on 30,000 plants per acre on corn, you have the equivalent of 3.17 pounds of active insecticide per acre, but they don't consider that. The neonicotinoid seed treatment is on virtually every genetically engineered seed in our country. You can't buy them without. They haven't tabulated that into their calculation. The resistance from the insects, as the excellent scientists at the university that were willing to speak out in the early days said is going to happen, did and has happened. So now they're buying the genetically engineered seed and still using the planter applied insecticide, and or now the latest development is, oh, well, we're going to use RNAi insecticide applications. If you think it was an untested crapshoot with first and second generation genetic engineering, wait and see what happens to the side effects from this RNAi technology that's being introduced. But anyway, the rootworm resistance has manifested itself well. Being in the seed business, I had a unique view of this in the early days, because in the early days we sold the corn for X number of dollars a bag and the technology fee was on top of that. So when my last year of selling seed was 2010, it was a good day. I'll guarantee you, I was so happy to be out of the seed sales business because of all the quagmire, but I thought I'm gonna do some math. The technology fees, as I said, were listed separately. The seed was X number of dollars a bag and the tech fee was X number of dollars a bag. So based on that, I sat down with a pencil, paper, and a calculator, and I added up what this would equate to for royalties. So I presumed that 100% of the corn acres, according to USDA's planted acres that year, would have the latest and greatest genetically engineered seed planted. The technology fee that would generate was $5,274 million. Soybeans was 78.9 million acres, $24 an acre, so just short of $1.9 billion tech fee. The cotton, $78 an acre, $850 million. I had the privilege of working in Mitchell County, Georgia for 3-4 years with farmers, and I got the history on the cotton seed. In 1993, before it was genetically engineered, it was $45 to $60 per 50-pound bag. When genetic engineering came along, it was 140,000, or not 140,000, it was so many seeds per bag, so the bag didn't weigh 50 pounds, so it's not a true comparison here. But 230,000 seeds. The seed cost was $159.99. The tech fee was $412.20 a bag. The seed treatment was a combination of insecticide, a fungicide, and nematicide, which if you didn't use, you would not get a stand of cotton because there were so many insects and soil-borne and nematode type issues that you wouldn't get a stand, so you had to use the insecticide. So that total was $697.19 a bag. Well, then I asked my extension friend to update this for me in 2018, and he said, well, I can't get the breakdown because they hide that now. They just give you a per acre figure. So in 1994, it was $8.40 an acre to plant the cottonseed, but in 2018, it's $100.90 an acre. Continuing on with the tech fees, again, presuming 100% utilization in 2010 at $80 an acre for the sugar beets, $96 million. Canola, we don't plant a lot of that. So we total that up, not including the Roundup Ready crops, it's $8.7 billion for 1 year in the US only. Well, I've been privileged to speak in Canada a number of times, so I certainly don't want to leave you out, so I added in your canola acres, and this is an old number, it's probably changed since then, but that added some more, so it's $9.9 billion in North America for technology fees. That's no seed, that's no fertilizer, that's no chemical, that's tech fee. So I asked a question, what might the motivation be of these companies that are promoting this? This is a crude example of how I try to illustrate the early development of genetically engineered crops. This is the genetic makeup of that plant, and they're going to blast in there with a shotgun type device this characteristic that they want to insert and have manifest. And based on conversations I had had with Dr. Huber and others, I said there was a 1 in 100,000 chance they could put it in the same spot twice. Well, I gave a talk in Washington State in 2013, I think it was, and a retired molecular microbiologist from Washington State politely raised her hand and she said, Howard, the odds are not nearly that good. She sent me a slide and showed me this, and it's 1 in a trillion to 1 in 100 trillion. And then the next day she said, no, wait a minute, I did the math wrong. It's 1 in a sextillion to 1 in 100 sextillion that they're going to get in the same spot twice. Well, you're going to see why pretty quick why that's important. The second generation, where they say, oh, this is much more precise, we're using CRISPR, cluster regulatory interface short palindromic repeats. CRISPR's a lot easier to say. They snip and insert. They say, oh, this is accurate, this is precise. But thankfully, Dr. Huber provided me with this slide. When they do this snip and insert, they have no ability to control the interspatial relationship of the genetic makeup of that plant. In other words, they don't have a clue what they're doing. It's still a crapshoot. And they have no ability to control or predict how the eventual final makeup of the fruit of that plant is going to be affected. But remember, we are told that GM crops are safe. We've been doing it for thousands of years. The industry told us that, that's been happening for thousands of years. And the government approved it. Could I see a show of hands for everybody that trusts the government, please? Okay, we can proceed. If you would like to read how this played out in history in our country, I recommend this book by Stephen Drucker. He did an excellent job. He's an attorney of really investigating and compiling information as far as how this process came about. So, as I said, I was privileged to be a crop and livestock nutrition advisor, started in 1992. BT corn in Nebraska. Had a customer that the seed salesman come out, if you're not planting this BT corn, you're missing the boat, you're losing money. So, okay, he talked him into it. He planted enough to fill 1 grain bin, he filled that bin, he had the other corn, non-GMO. He ground feed for the sows out of the BT corn bin. BT corn, remember that, not Roundup Ready, BT. And his conception rate dropped 30% of what he was used to seeing. He called up, what do we do? I said, well, we've heard some issues, so I said, don't use it again. So he went back to the other bin, numbers came back to normal, and he thought, well, that must have been a fluke, I'll try it one more time. So he ground out of the BT corn bin again, same results, it dropped back down. Another customer in South Dakota on a computerized record keeping system, BT corn, no Roundup, not yet. They had 1.6 pigs less per litter, and the average weight of the pigs was less when they were born. Fast forward to 2000, a different version of BT corn, not Roundup Ready, BT corn, caused something called pseudo-pregnancies in the sows. They seemed like they had conceived, they went through the full gestation, and upon delivery, all they got was the afterbirth. And this gentleman was a member of the Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau reporter heard about it. He comes out to his farm, writes the story about it, it comes out in the Farm Bureau spokesman, and he starts getting phone calls from